Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today's video is going to be relatively short because the book is relatively short. This book today is Reflections on Life in the San Juan Islands. The cover photograph is by John Miller. Section images are by John Miller. Cover and book design by Pam Herber. Author photograph by Pam Herber. This book is labeled Literature and Pacific Northwest and is written by Mary Calvert. I bought this book from Coes Books, as I buy so many of my other books from, and it looks like I bought it on July 2nd of 2022. I bought this book with Legends and Lattes, Lassoing the Sun, A Year in America's National Parks, and then a couple miscellaneous book items, 3 items specifically. In total, it was about a $50 purchase that day. What I'm especially impressed by is the fact that I bought Legends and Lattes in July, which is, to my understanding, before the Tor edition started publishing. Additional information about this book is that it is signed, but despite being signed by the author, it is only $6.50. The book was published in 2009, according to the copyright information, and this is a first edition printing. The signature reads, "To Margaret, Happy Reading, June 2nd, 2014, signed Mary Calvert." So, this book was purchased, or at the very least signed, sometime after its printing, which may or may not speak to how many units this was moving. The content of this book is only 112 pages long, but it's probably a fair bit shorter given that several pages are blank. So for example, pages 77 and 78 are a blank page to separate the season of summer from the season of autumn. Page 79 is just an image of a wheelbarrow and the word autumn. The following page, page 80, is blank. So all told, there's probably only 102, 103 actual pages of content in this book. The acknowledgments section provides some insight into how this book came about. It reads, "A thank you to Jack Corey for allowing me to write for IslandGuardian.com and suggesting I compile my columns into a book. A special thanks to John Miller for his superb cover photograph of swans on our lake and the seasonal artwork included in the body of the book." The San Juan Islands are up in the northwest part of the United States, the northwesternmost portions of Washington State and the lower 48 states. The introduction is a good, introduction into how this author writes, and part of what hooked me. There is a particular question asked of every islander who wasn't born here. It may come early in a budding friendship or much later, but at some time the question, "How did you get to San Juan Island?" will arise. Our road to San Juan Island started in 1957 in Garden City, New York. In 1957, my husband's parents welcomed Hartmut, a young German boy, into their home. He was participating in a year-long American Field Service program. The exchange, as we who participate in such exchanges say, took. In the decades that followed, college careers, marriages, and children kept our extended family together on both sides of the Atlantic. In 1994, Hartmut's youngest daughter asked to live with us in Oklahoma as an exchange student. We were elated with the possibility of a second-generation exchange. The request came to fruition through the Rotary Youth Exchange Program. At the end of Corinna's time with us, we asked her if there was something specific she wanted to see before returning to Germany. "Yes," she said without hesitation. I'd like to see orca whales. We called longtime friends in Seattle who told us that the San Juan Islands should be our destination if we wanted to see the whales. We arrived in Friday Harbor on the Saturday of Memorial Day weekend of 1994. The ferry ride alone from Anacortes was worth the trip. The weather was rainy, foggy, and cold. We loved it. We dropped our bags at a motel on Spring Street and met with Captain Rick, owner of the Bon Accord, for a whale watching tour. Corinna and I opted to sit out on the foredeck in the rain to smell the salt water and scan the horizon. Near Lime Kiln Lighthouse, we saw our first pot of whales. In the course of a half hour, one rose from the water in what I later learned was a spy hop. Another exploded in a "you can't top this" breach. Corinna was ecstatic. But I felt something stirring, a deeper yearning, something in that moment I could not articulate. And then she goes on to describe exploring the rest of her 4-hour trip around the island, touring the armed with a map and exploring everything they could. And finally, "Can you imagine living here?" John asked me in a quiet voice. No, I didn't dare. We discovered that each of us had felt taken with the island, an unspoken sense of homecoming we could not explain. On a recent trip to Germany, we spent time with our friends. Smiling, Corinna asked us if we still felt the same way about island living. Yes, we told her, 10 times over. That's a good introduction. And what I like about it is she really gets into her feelings and why she came there and what she felt hooked her. Now, the chapters, such as they are, start with winter and then progress through the seasons until it comes back to winter. And there are really nice and short stories, presumably 1 or 2 page columns, that she wrote for this website. She has imaginary conversations with Miss Mona Camel that start with, "Good morning, Mona. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me." "Good morning to you. First, it's imperative that you know I'm a dromedary camel and not a Bactrian camel. So let's just get that little bit of information out of the way up front." And then it continues, and she has a nice little conversation with this camel that is apparently kind of a mascot to the island. She talks about vacations that her family takes to spend with her. In A Tidbit of Spring, she first notices the camel. The person she's with tells her her name is Mona, and in parentheses on page 28, note to self, Mona needs her own interview, which, of course, she follows later in the book. And in A Tidbit of Spring, she says, "You never tell me when you're leaving," I say to the swans. "So if you're gone tomorrow, have a great spring and summer. We'll be here when you get back." The sun warms me up on the way up the hill. There is a lot more of it these days. Another of the reasons, I am sure, for the bounce in my step. John pops in the house fresh from an errand. "What's that I smell?" "It's banana bread aroma trying to escape," I explain as I slip out of my shoes. "Have you noticed how it hovers around the door jamb and tickles your nose when you come in?" He sets another carton of Heidi eggs on the table. "You're peppy today. What's up?" "Spring's up, that's what. Not all the way, I know, but enough to make me feel the push of new birth." "And all the food is for?" "Days when plants and dirt regain their rightful place in the hierarchy of the seasons, and I won't want to cook. An appetizer of spring is what we're having. A tidbit to tide us over until the entree arrives. I'm ready. Woot woot." So she has this really fun and almost bombastic personality when writing. It's like she's constantly falling in love with the island she calls home. Every new spring, every new thing she meets is something that she can learn to love and expand her knowledge of the island with. So over the course of these 100 pages, you really get a sense for what island living is like without really getting a good understanding of it. It's just enough to pull you in so that you want to spend time there, so that you do understand fully what her reasons for staying there are. In the story in praise of November. She closes it with, regardless of the tumult in the world beyond the end of our lane, all is well here amid the swans and autumnal rains of November. She's happy where she is, and that's all she needs. And that's really what this book is about, that happiness and contentness with home and that sense of place. I liked this book. I don't think it was necessarily worth $6.50. I'm not even sure it would ever approach the worth of $13, $12.95 on the back cover. But what I can say is that it was good money, and if $6.50 is half the listing price of the book, I kind of got that for the signature and that little message in the front. I'm not Margaret, I'm Wildstag, but I got that message nonetheless. I think it's worth reading if you can find it for, say, $3 or $4. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this book. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.